Good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock. I see we have quite a number of people already with us. We'll give those numbers a bit of time to build. And in the meantime, while we're doing that, I'll introduce myself and I'll talk a little bit more about who we are and what we do. So my name is Lee Dupree. I'm the Managing Director of BEE Novation. We're a BEE and transformation consultancy, and we work with our clients to handhold them through the BEE process. We believe that integrating the different pieces of transformation legislation is the most effective way of doing that, and ensuring that you're not just compliant, but you're compliant in a way that's also cost effective, but more importantly, makes a difference to the lives of the people who need it the most. So I'm joined today by Mark Ashton. He's from Yes, he's the business development head there. He's also the former CEO of MoneyWeb and former editor of FinWeek. And my colleague, Donovan Hornsby, who's our transformation specialist. He's got a background in industrial psychology and BEE, and has worked in BEE for many, many years, right from the inception. So between all of us, we hope that we can answer all of your questions as well as possible. We know that we've worked closely with Yes from inception. We've hosted a number of events and workshops around the country with Yes. So it made sense for us to be able to assist our clients and, and anybody else who has an interest in implementing Yes, or who has already implemented Yes and would like to better understand some of the ways that they can use Yes better, but more importantly, make sure that they can get some of their technical questions answered around implementation, especially issues relating to year 2 and even year 3 in some cases. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Mark. But before I do, we ask that you keep the session interactive. So please submit as many questions as you like to the Q&A. You're welcome to use the chat function as well. The chat facility we won't use for Q&A, so please channel your questions to the Q&A. But feel free to communicate amongst each other. So I'm going to pass it on to Mark and ask him to talk a little bit more about Yes and some of the issues and areas of focus that he thinks need attention right now for businesses. Mark.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Lee and Donovan, for hosting us this morning. As Lee indicated, my name is Mark Ashton. I'm heading up the business development function at the Youth Employment Service at the moment. Just looking through some of the attendees. Some of us have interacted before. Some new names there as well, which is great. So I'd love to be able to engage with you. I think if I can just echo Lee's comment earlier about interactivity. I think we've often been overwhelmed by the number of webinars we're doing, Teams chats, etc. So I'd really like to try and keep going with the human element and interactivity, get a sense of what it is important to you guys as potential implementers of Yes, and trying to understand exactly what your pain points and maybe the opportunity points are from a Yes perspective. So I mean, maybe the first thing I wanted to kick off with, I'm the eternal optimist in many ways. And I wanted to maybe kick off with this comment that, there's been actually a lot of good news happening in the economy at the moment. To give you some sense around Yes, I mean, we've had over 50 businesses register in the last 5 weeks, which is incredibly encouraging. What's nice about that is there's been quite a few QSEs coming through. That kind of indicates that while we know that there's a lot of stress in the kind of mid-sized business, small and mid-sized business environment, people are still optimistic. People are still implementing the Yes program. We've got about 150 businesses now participating in the year 2 implementations, and we're about to put our 6th company on for year 3. I think that speaks to a lot of the sustainability about the Yes program. People have been talking about, there was often this perception that Yes had a sunset clause, or that it wasn't going to be able to go all the way over a multi-year program. It was really just a short-term BEE incentive. But what we can definitely see is there are more and more organizations coming on board and seeing this as part of a sustainable solution, as part of their BBEE contribution, but also their nation-building contribution. I mean, we've got some fantastic stories coming through. A lot of the organizations are making use of the Yes implementation partner model for their year 2 implementations. And you can see things like the community healthcare workers are being incapacitated. We've got a lot of the education initiatives happening at the moment. There's good news stories out there, and I really want to encourage you to come and chat to us and see how we can build YES as part of a multi-year program rather than just a fix that gets sold to you at the end of a measurement period to help you score a short-term level up. One of the very cool projects that we've been working on at the moment is the Master for All project, and I just want to maybe touch on this because I think it speaks to sustainability of YES and where YES is coming from. So many of you'll be aware YES has been obviously the opportunity to create new jobs while under lockdown was incredibly difficult. But YES ended up partnering with a number of township seamstresses to go and do these cloth face masks. And since the start of April, they've put about R1 million back into these township entrepreneurs. These are going through kind of the gig job environment, but kind of some of the big work, big sponsors of that particular project are the likes of Exemplar, which is a JSE listed property group. Uber came along, and I think what's nice about that Uber example is that it talks to YES being able to bring or being able to bring new suppliers into an international or multinational operating in South Africa. So I think that's very cool, and it kind of gives you a new context around how you can engage with YES from across different elements. I think one of the questions that I want to maybe kick this whole thing off with a bit of a poll, and we've got one set up at the moment, is, are you guys feeling optimistic about the rest of the year? I mean, we're halfway through it. It feels like we've lived a decade in the space of 6 months, but it's been an incredibly, tumultuous period of time. But, there seems to be some confidence coming back into the economy, and I know that the team is going to post a link to the poll shortly, but I'd be interested to know just how many of you are actually optimistic about the business environment going forward. So I'm going to give you a moment just to get that poll link up, and then we'll kick off with some of the kind of interesting developments that we've got there.
So thanks for that, Mark. While we're getting the poll ready, can I ask Donovan, your experiences of YES implementation? You've worked with a number of multinationals, you've worked with a number of medium and large size businesses as well. What are some of the, firstly, interesting scenarios you've seen come up, but also what are some of the inaccuracies that you see come up around YES implementation?
Thank you, Lee, and thank you to everyone joining today. We really appreciate your time. One of the things that we're finding within the BE and YES is there's still uncertainty as to what is happening, which is it's quite sad, really, because companies then are not engaging with the YES, they're not engaging with the DTI, and that is really where you want to be engaging to get the correct information. Unfortunately, with certain consultants, with certain even verification agencies that I've seen, there's been a lot of uncertainty as to how YES can look. I'll give you a very quick example. We went through a process where a verification agency said that they don't have to be in the program for 8 months as long as they're on the program. 8 months is only the time frame that you don't have to replace. And therefore, even in your second year, if they're on the program for 4 months, you would score the full value of the YES uptake. And I'm sure Mark has heard many of those as well. So misinformation we're finding is still out there. And what we say to organizations is, please make contact with the correct people. That's very important. YES themselves are very open to communicating with the public. So are the DTI. So we encourage organizations, if they're wanting to seek clarity, please go through these organizations. We at BEE Novation can also assist in that process. We have good links and ties, and we always update ourselves with what's happening in the industry with regarding to YES, BEE. We're lucky that we work for various industries, various different size companies. So we're able to gauge exactly what some of the issues are. I just want to say this from the onset though. Please know that BEE is not YES, okay? It's a supplement to YES. It's a concession given for organizations that are struggling to achieve a certain level, gives them an opportunity to level up. And the last point I will say to this, and Mark, I'm agreeing with you, I'm very optimistic. What I've seen so far is with companies coming back, especially 1 June, look at construction, look at the insurance industries, look at your banks. If you want to do work for any of these entities, They don't even want a letter of when you're going to do the scorecard. They want to see an actual scorecard with a particular level within some of these industries. So this is something that's very important. We're saying companies have come through a trying process with COVID. They may not have been able to fulfill their mandate with regards to the BEE elements. If this is the case, you're stuck. Yes, there's something to assist you for this year in terms of getting the desired BEE level, while at the same time, you're putting in a proper transformation and compliance strategy. So very important for businesses. Start engaging now. Year ends are coming up soon. You need to know where you are. And if you want to be engaging with yes, remember, especially if it's year 2, it has to be 8 months on the program. So get in touch with Mark, get in touch with Lee to help you with this process. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Donovan. So I've just shared the results of the poll on your screen.
Right down the middle.
Yeah, just about. That's quite interesting. So, Mark, maybe you can give us your assessment of what that means. But before you do, I'll also ask you another question. Yes has recently introduced a number of packages that are more cost effective for smaller businesses in particular to be able to take advantage of. Can I ask you to please share a little bit more information on that for the audience as well?
Yep, sure. So, I mean, maybe just before I move into that, Donovan mentioned the types of businesses coming on board. You know, some of the other trends that we're seeing quite a lot of tech companies coming through now. I mean, that's been interesting. There was very low adoption from the technology sector, quite a lot of engineering companies. Construction, surprisingly, also picked up quite a lot as well. So that's very encouraging because it means that we're not just kind of looking at these multinationals, but we're also looking at QSEs across the board. And I mean, tech's always an exciting opportunity because it talks to some of the jobs that we can create, and I'll talk to that shortly. In terms of the cost, I mean, I know that there's always this argument, and I know we're going to get into it just now about, you know, yes, it's expensive to implement, etc. Let's maybe just take one step back. I mean, there are effectively 3 fees associated with your yes implementation. There is a registration fee, which is based on your NPAT, so that's capped at the 20,000 Rand per corporate. Then you have your monitoring and evaluation fee, and remember there are a couple of considerations there. So initially that's based on your net profit after tax, but it depends whether you're doing it for BEE or non-BEE purposes. And then it depends on the whether you're making use of an implementation partner or not. And so the starting point would be we've changed the bracket from which QSCs can participate and those with low profits. So if your NPAT is less than 4 million per year, your monitoring evaluation fee is 1,700 per youth. And then 4 to 12 is 3,000 per youth, and then it scales upwards for the more profitable organizations. And then your third cost on that is going to be the stipend for the youth. An important consideration there is remember that the national minimum wage was increased at the end of February 2020. A lot of people still have their 3,500 as their salary for these youth. And you need to remember that this needs to be updated to include this change in the national minimum wage there. When it comes to the implementation partner, remember that if you are going to go through a yes vetted implementation partner, there's 24 sitting on that list at the moment. There's a fee of 4,000 Rand per youth. That's not based, so you don't pay a new M&E fee every time you add a new youth to the program. If your target is 10, you'll pay your monitoring evaluation fee for the target. You don't charge for the additional replacements. Does that answer the question high level for you, Lee?
Yes, thank you very much. I think something else that people are going to be quite interested in, and something that we had mentioned in our marketing communications around this webinar, was also some of the allowances that the DTI are going to be making for small businesses, well, for businesses on yes implementation now during the midst of the COVID pandemic that everybody is facing. Do you want to share a little bit more about those, please? I think many companies are going to be particularly interested in how they can leverage that and how it's going to help them right now.
Yep. So maybe we can springboard off that clarification statement that came out from the DTIC in February, and then we can build out a couple of these things because I think it touches on a couple of these elements. So I'm just going to run through the statement from the top. The big question was around maintain or improve. So there was quite a lot of debate about what the maintain or improve element of this meant. So there were some interpretations that were saying if you were a level 6, you used yes to move up 2 levels to get you to a level 4. There was an argument that you had to maintain the level 4 before you could apply yes for your second year participation. So that obviously increases the cost of the program. And the DTI has clarified that, DTIC has clarified that. It says the BBBEE status level that needs to be maintained or improved upon is the BBBEE status level obtained in the first year of participating under the YES initiative before YES BBBEE recognition. So that gives you some sense of what you need to maintain or improve before moving on to subsequent years. There is also a buffer that has been built in. So they've built in a 5% buffer for organizations who have obviously when you employ youth, you are going to have drop-offs and replacements. And one of the issues that has come up quite regularly, particularly if you've got a big cohort, is constantly having to replace the youth. And the DTIC has given a 5% buffer for your target. Another nice change, and it's something we've starting to see, is transport companies are now allowed to participate in YES. That's very encouraging. What else have we got here? The opportunity, you can now do absorption via your absorption can go through enterprise and supplier development. So in other words, you can if you can't absorb youth into your own organization and you can't absorb them into the implementation partner, if you've gone through that model, you could put them through an enterprise and supplier development program, and verifiable evidence would include, but is not limited to, samples of certified copies of ID, and then the proof of procurement documents, company registration documents, ESD agreements, and that the absorption has been met in the form of the Black youth establishing their own entity. Those were kind of the high level changes that came through. And I think that the kind of trends that we're seeing, I think I want to just touch on what Donovan mentioned about these organizations participating from a year 2 perspective. It's quite important to remember that YES gives you upfront recognition for your first year of participation, but if you're going to be verified for your second year of participation, the youth need to have completed a minimum of 8 months. And so you need to demonstrate a couple of things when you do year 2 implementation. The first one is you need to demonstrate that your cohort actually got the 12-month quality work experience, and the first cohort got a 12-month quality work experience, and you need to demonstrate the 2.5 or 5% absorption from your year 1 cohort. I know that there are quite a few organizations and consultants that are suggesting you can play chicken with the absorption thing because it's not going to be checked. We did actually have a technical workshop with the DTIC on Friday, and they did indicate that this will still be, they are going to want to see evidence of absorption from these year 1 cohorts. So that's quite important. And if your advice is not to do the absorption and see what will happen, bear in mind that there's a chance that you are going to get caught out from that perspective. The 8 months is important, and we can see a number of organizations have got their timing wrong on that. What was encouraging, though, obviously we live in very interesting times at the moment in terms of the COVID-19 outbreak. The DTIC has been quite accommodating of organizations that have battled to recruit during the lockdown period. That'll be March, April, May specifically. And they have indicated that they are prepared to entertain discussions and motivations for not being able to recruit during a period. One of the organizations is a big retail group, for instance, and they're battling to recruit their cohort inside of the measured period, and they're prepared to engage that particular corporate around it. The other thing that we're seeing quite a lot of, and the debate is around this replacement of replacement costs. And I think maybe one of the challenges that people often miscalculate with youth is the cost of replacement. So if you remember correctly, if a youth falls off a program, you've got 30 days in which to replace them. Some organizations have quite high churn, and that means that the new youth need to get a new 12-month fixed term contract. which can obviously create an ongoing liability for the organization. The incentive is obviously to make sure that these youth actually finish their 12-month quality work experience. But the DTIC inside of this workshop spoke of this concept of positive attrition or positive fall off, where youth are actually offered permanent contracts, and they'd be prepared to look at that from their perspective as well. Yeah, I mean, those are kind of the high level things. I mean, we obviously, the business environment is challenging at the moment, and kind of the tone is, let's see how we can work together with organizations. Let's see if we can go and find a way to go and keep these youth employed, demonstrate the work experience that they're getting, and just kind of stick to the general principles of tackling this youth unemployment crisis in South Africa.
Thanks for that, Mark. Very interesting, insightful, and particularly valuable for a number of businesses out there. You mentioned companies getting their absorption timing wrong. Donovan, what advice would you have for any companies out there, technically, should they miss that eight-month deadline? And I think a lot of companies who get that wrong are going to be looking for solutions. And they're going to want to know, how best do we solve this? Do you have any advice or recommendations for any businesses that find themselves in that position?
Thank you, Lee. Look, it's a difficult one because remember, with the youth as well falling off the program, it becomes quite problematic in terms of replacing. What we've said to organizations is, whoever you are doing the project with, whether it's through yourself or through an implementation partner, is there anything in the contract that talks about assisting with the absorption? What opportunities will be made after the program completes? That's a nice way, because you're planning forward, you're planning for post the youth being on the program. And I think that's very important. It's not always guaranteed, but if you filter in those buffers, you're always on top of it, you're always monitoring it. By the end of the program, there should be many opportunities for the youth to be absorbed, either by the industry, by the company themselves. Again, with the organization, you can set up various controls where through your supplier chain, you look at opportunities for these youth to get employed. So look at what particular skills your suppliers need if you cannot absorb them. That's a nice way of creating that buffer and building that in terms of ensuring that the absorption does take place. Similar with an implementation partner. What guarantees do they have? Are they going to put systems in place to ensure that they're going to try and get absorption? Not always possible, but can they put things in place to say, we are linked with these organizations, all our youth through our program gets put on a database that's looked at from these particular industries that look at these skills. That's a very nice way in terms of protecting yourself from that absorption. It can harm your whole YES implementation if it's not looked after. And that is one of the key things that Mark also brought up in terms of who's implementing this for you. How often are they monitoring it? What feedback are they giving? Because we find a lot of organizations don't get that feedback. So we don't know if you dropped off, if what's going on. At the end of the program, they say, yeah, but hey, we forgot to tell you about that 10% that may have dropped off. So organizations plan it properly. If you're using implementation partners or internally, look at how you're going to create opportunities for that absorption. And that will become quite important. Okay.
Thanks, Donovan. And then speaking of timing, still on that topic, Mark, what advice does YES have for companies who don't get the timing right for year 2 and year 3?
Look, I mean, it is a tough one. I mean, the rules are pretty clear from that perspective. I mean, you'd obviously have the opportunity to move out your verification to try and comply. I mean, if you were impacted by the lockdown, you could petition to the more motivate to the DTI that there were reasons that were kind of overarching for it. I think maybe I just want to come back to Donovan's point, because I do think that it does talk to this timing issue in terms of project management. If I look at the way that YES is taken to market, often by a number of consulting firms, is it was sold as a quick fix. We kind of drop it in at the last minute, the last week of their measurement period. We've kind of ticked all the other boxes and we quickly put yes on top of it. And yes is kind of just going to go and find some youth for you, stick them into an implementation partner. I'm going to get my verification, and it's going to be a fire and forget type program. I think that you're going to end up, you might get a short-term benefit there, but the longer-term cost of that, of poor planning, I think adds up very quickly. So, I mean, if you are in that situation where you put your youth on in the last kind of last week of your previous measurement period, remember that when you start your second year cohort, you're going to end up in a situation where there's an overlap, and you're going to end up being effectively paying double or quadruple your target, depending on what you're trying to achieve, whether it's 1 or 2 levels. So you need to be very careful that you're not trying to look for a short-term win to tick a box. You're also then going to have this case of high levels of drop-off and that kind of thing. So give it a little bit of planning, make sure you do it. I understand the benefit, the short-term benefit for it, but you got to weigh it up and say, is there an actual cost? Can I meet the cost implications that come out of this?
And Mark, still on you. You mentioned a moment ago the ESD program opportunities that companies can take advantage of for the Yes Youth. I'm curious, has Yes seen an uptake of that yet, or is it still too soon for companies to be implementing that as a solution?
So, I mean, I think Yes is maturing quite a lot. And I mean, I know you and I have had quite a few discussions about the enterprise and supplier development space. There are a couple of considerations there. So, I mean, many of you will be familiar with the Yes Hub model, for instance. So there's the initial hub that is set up in Tembisa. That's got the restaurant, it's got the Google Classroom, it's got the aquaponics and hydroponics facility. And that's quite a nice example of creating work opportunities inside of the community. And I think this is quite important because, if I look at some of the Yes implementations at a kind of core Yes Central model, which is the jobs and the BBBEE benefit for it, a lot of people get, one of the mistakes that people make, and it ends up being quite high churn, is simply the cost of getting to and from work is almost prohibitive for many of these youth that are earning $3,600 a month. I mean, we had an engineering company last year that had ended up adding, it was nearly 800,000 Rand to their implementation, simply because they had such high churn on their youth. And when we started investigating it, I mean, they were quite far removed from where their youth were working, where they were sourcing their youth from, and they were ending up at the youth were effectively running out of money by the middle of the month and not able to get to work, and that obviously creates natural employer-employee tension. Whereas the principle behind those Yes Hubs has been to create work opportunities inside of the communities closer to work, closer to where youth live and where they've got the opportunity to work. So there's a new hub that's busy in rolling out at the moment in Alex, and that's by the Mall of Alex at the moment, and you can see some of the construction taking place there. And the next site is Saldanha, and then there are 2 up by Bushbuck Ridge and in the northwest that are on the cards at the moment. So we can see a number of organizations saying, look, we can see an opportunity to deploy enterprise and supplier development there. We've had some discussions around equity equivalent projects, but these are long-term planning things that need to be, Yes is kind of its core business, and then these are the things that are kind of maturing out of it. Other smaller examples of where we can see this working quite nicely is with one of the some of the corporates, particularly in the tech space. They're very keen to use, they don't have the appetite or the ability to absorb youth internally, and they've been able to put these youth into a third-party implementation partner, and they will then go and set, at the end of their 12-month quality work experience, these youth are going to go and move out into setting up their own businesses to build websites. And that can be kind of a multi-year journey where they can do their Yes recognition, set the youth up in a small business so you can get some enterprise development applications there, get that business up and running and develop some supply contracts, and then look at things like the supply development opportunities, which could ultimately fit into a broader multi-year Yes implementation.
Thanks for that, Mark. Donovan, back to you. One of the things we've realized working with clients is that sometimes yes can be a more cost-effective solution for helping companies achieve a better score than some of the other elements. So can I ask you to just share some of your experiences as far as that's concerned, please, and what lessons you think are valuable for anybody watching today to take away?
Thank you, Lee, for that. And that's very important. I mentioned at the beginning that yes and BEE are aligned, but they're not exclusive. What we find for a lot of organizations, when it comes to looking at cost-saving strategies, I always say your BEE strategy should be built into your overall company strategy anyway. So your budgets, all of that should be determined quite early on. And a lot of companies have seen to that. However, what happens in a situation where you are happy with your level 5, all of a sudden the organization came back and said, we require you now for level 2 or higher to be on a certain level of how we give out work, etc. Or during this COVID process, you lost a few months. Now all of a sudden your skills budget is gone. Now you're looking and you're scrambling, you're saying, sure, I can't fulfill the skills mandate. However, I still require a particular level. So I'm going to give you an example on that, Lee. I'm going to take a medium-sized company. Let's just say turnover around 70 million, 120 staff, payroll about 30 million, very professional type organization. If you go into the skills development portion, all of a sudden they're finding that 2.5% budget for bursaries will work out to roughly about 770,000, 750,000 Rand to score 4 points. Now, if you're an organization that has to get those 4 points, you've struggled, you've planned for it, you're now stuck, you don't have 750,000 in your budget, that's where yes becomes very interesting and important. I'm going to say this very quickly because Mark mentioned this. Please align it to something that's long-term. It's a quick fix. Have that as a strategy for a quick fix, but make sure your BEE aligns to your level that you want going forward. So the same organization, 70 million turnover, 120 staff, you're looking at about a payroll of over 30 million, 750 million spend. For 4 points, I'm on a level 8 at 86 points. As a consultant, I will look at this organization and I would say, forgo the 0.3% on disability, the 2.5% on bursary, purely because if you implement yes, company that size, they will only need roughly about 6 yes to part of the program. 6 yes will cost you in the region of about 330,000 if you're hosting it yourself, not external. So that's almost a double saving for an organization who's now struggled. And all of a sudden your BEE level, which was in a level 4, remember 80 to 90 points, they were at 86 with the bursary, they now dropped to 82. Yes is going to take them to a level 3. The bursary scheme would not have been able to take them to a level 3. Again, I'm not saying to substitute like for like, but as an organization, if you run into these difficulties, you've been pressured, you've planned for a particular level, and because the situation's out of your control, you couldn't achieve, please consider yes from that perspective. We always say to organizations, remember, if you're a multinational or you're an organization that doesn't want to do ownership, your starting point is 93 points. That's on the DTI scorecard. That's a level 3 right away. You're probably going to be discounted one level because you don't have ownership, and more likely you're not going to maximize all the other elements. So your starting point is going to be a level 5. Your ownership is something that was put on hold for whatever reasons. You're still planning on it. It takes time, and it should. Then we're saying to organizations for this year, here's an opportunity to get to a higher level. Implementing yes can give you up 2 levels to get to your level 3. Or can be 1 level to get you up to your level 4. So the cost what's it going to cost you for yes? It can be cheaper, but again, look at your overall scorecard. Where are you struggling to have your budget? If you are struggling, if there's a particular level, you're still waiting for ownership to come through, we find that yes is a wonderful initiative. If it's done correctly in terms of meaningful work experience, and companies forget that sometimes. Mark mentioned monitoring, supervising the staff or project managing them. that's when you're going to come into a lot of difficulties with regards to yes. Okay, I hope I've answered your question, Lee.
Yes, thank you for that, Donovan. I hope the audience members find that valuable. Mark, I'll ask you if you have anything to add on regarding that, because I think it's quite an important thing companies need to be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I
And
think
at the same
that
time, I'll look at the poll as well at the same time, if you don't mind. So.
No, sure. So, I mean, you know, Donovan used the term, you know, the meaningful work experience. I mean, yes, talks about a quality work experience. You know, like, I think we often forget that there is actually a human element to it. And I mean, often, you know, yes, at its core is an incentive. We sit inside this. It does often kind of depersonalize it from some perspective. But, you know, yes, at its core does want to be able to engage people around the type of work that youth do. You know, we came across a company, I'm trying to think when it would have been in January this year, and what people don't realize is that yes, actually has quite an active call center. So there are, you know, Tash is very passionate about seeing that the youth are actually having a quality work experience. And this call center was phoning around a number of youth, and she ended up phoning one of the companies in KZN, or phoning the youth at one of the companies in KZN. And this youth said that they were brought onto the program and promptly put on 12 months leave. They would get their 3.6 or 3.5, whatever it was at the time, and they would get their salary every month. And they didn't have to show up. They just needed to go and just say that they were working, and yes, they would claim the BBBEE benefit. And you know, we called the company on it, and we said, you know, this is not the purpose of yes. Yes is supposed to provide this quality work experience. And I think that the programs that end up finding that the costs run higher, the companies that find they have high churn, is because they forget that there is a human element to it. I mean, we've got some very cool stories about youth that have been able to get customer-facing activities going. They're talking out toward they're actually becoming assets of the organization. But if you're doing it simply to tick a box, you're going to end up finding a situation where they don't have where the youth are going to drop off because they can detect this isn't actually a program that's invested in by the employer. It's simply a box ticking exercise. So I really like that reference that Donovan's spoken about there. And I think that, you know, because there was this perception of yes being very much a short-term incentive, it's now demonstrating. I mean, 6 companies now on level 3 is cool. I mean, most people don't even know that yes have been around that long. And I think that's been one of the very nice incentives that we can talk about is yes is actually sustainable. It is bringing organizations on. And there are some, you know, and when you invest in the youth, the program makes sense for you.
Thanks for that, Mark. So interestingly, it seems, and you'll be very happy to see the results of that poll.
Nice.
But the majority of people would be very happy to implement yes for both the long-term perspective and the short-term cash flow benefit. So that's very positive. Thanks everybody for that input.
There's a question that's come. Yeah, I see there's a question that's just come through on the chat functionality. So the question reads: what if a client is a current level 2 and with yes they move up to a level 1? You know, what's the incentive to do that once they reach the level 1? This is, I mean, it's a fair question, and it's something we are engaged in the DTRC around. Is, you know, are there other ways to do it? You know, the kind of feedback from their side is effectively the incentive has done what it was intended to do. They've moved you up the level. You know, there were some questions of what happens if I move up to a 1, I don't meet my other elements on the scorecard, I'm going to drop down, then can I, well, I'm going to drop down noticeably, can I use yes to pull me back up? And there's been a whole lot of discussions around that. I mean, as it stands, I mean, it's relatively black and white. There's no real incentive once you reach a level 1 to do it from a BEE perspective, but hopefully it then speaks to the quality of the youth that are coming through. So, you know, we've got these nice stories of youth that have been working inside of the motor dealerships, for instance, and the guys are becoming assets to the business where they're actually able to go and sell cars. So then the incentive is not just a case of moving up on the scorecard, it's actually somebody who's contributing to the bottom line. So I think there the discussion shifts from, you know, what's the short-term BE incentive to how do I have an asset inside the organization. But in direct answer to the question, I mean, once you're level 1, that's kind of your ceiling from a yes perspective.
Yeah, we've seen that with some of our clients who may already be level ones and therefore feel disincentivized to want to consider yes. I'm a big fan of yes, so I always see that as unfortunate. But they do have businesses to run at the end of the day, so they do have to make a proper financial decision.
Yeah.
Don, would you like to add anything onto that from your experience?
Yeah, I saw the question. Thank you, Katya, for the question. Organizations need to start taking transformation serious if they haven't not already. And that's one of the biggest problems. You know, transformation should be in your overall business strategy, should be incorporated there in terms of knowing what level you can achieve and knowing what level you want to achieve as an organization going forward. If yes is done to plug a gap, you need to look at it and say, now in a short to medium term, how are we going to use BEE to make up that deficit? Because remember with yes, and this is something maybe Mark might not be too happy, but what if yes goes away after 5 to 10 years and BEE is still around? Now, all of a sudden, we're finding that you have not concentrated on your BEE because you've been relying on yes constantly going forward. Building both into your strategy, very important. You should be looking at ways to get to your desired level of BEE without yes. And remember, yes is that extra benefit for organizations to help them now going forward and also in the medium term. The added benefit is that we add into youth unemployment. If you look at your G Summit goals globally, youth unemployment is one of the areas where yes is talking to. So from a company perspective, also remember, you still have your CSI, although this is slightly different, but you can show that as an organization, you're incorporating and you're doing things aligned to government strategy, and also in terms of the world organizations, you're achieving those goals as well. So that is something I would advise organizations, keep it in your strategy, keep looking at it, and know what you want to achieve going forward.
Thanks, Donovan.
Yeah.
Mark? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Lee, I mean, I just want to, yeah, I see
sorry.
that as well, and I'll touch on it now as well as part of this answer to it. I mean, I think that the benefit, and you know, Donovan speaks about it being a risk that, you know, yes goes away after a certain period of time. I think this is one of these things that also presents an opportunity. I mean, the organization does need to innovate. It needs to demonstrate its sustainability. So, you know, what one person sees a threat is also an opportunity that we can definitely look at. But then you think about, I mean, just think about the environment that we operate in at the moment, where we've got COVID-19 kind of ripping through a number of very vulnerable communities at the moment. And I mean, I know that you've been involved in some community healthcare worker projects yourselves. But, you know, the social benefits and the societal benefit of having been able to capacitate those organizations, I mean, you'll have to correct me on the numbers, but I mean, you know, if you took 1,000 healthcare workers, I mean, that can impact up to 400,000 individuals across the country because you've capacitated their healthcare options. Same with early stage literacy, software development, coding, etc., etc. We forget that actually contributes, those kind of things contribute to the education level in South Africa, the healthcare levels in South Africa. You know, the economic benefits and the spin-off of that then end up becoming something that it's an intangible. You can't measure it as part of your scorecard, but it is an intangible that does lift the rest of the environment. And then this question comes in, and this maybe speaks to, you know, builds on that, and it talks about using ESD as part of the absorption, as part of the absorption process. So, you know, we talk about small businesses being the future of South Africa and being the thing that's actually going to go and creating jobs. Now, you know, I said up front that we can see organizations are prepared to go and participate in yes, they are prepared to go and create new work experiences. But the reality is that, you know, the global trend says otherwise. You know, big corporates are downsizing. Big corporates are trying to kind of limit their exposure in terms of headcount. We're seeing more and more kind of gig type roles coming through, whether it's the Uber type models, or whether it is these kind of incubated small business models. There's a lot of that coming through as well. And, you know, if we can create, we're talking about sustainability. So if you can go and create set an entrepreneur or youth up in a small business where you can use your ED spend to go and buy them a computer, to go and set them up with an accounting practice, or with some accounting and bookkeeping support. Help them just get over that first, you know, 360 odd days of operation, you've already given them a foot in the door. I think that speak about 1,001 days is kind of the number that if you can manage to get that long, you've got a good chance of surviving as a small business. But we need to understand that getting a small business started in South Africa means that you need to invest over multiple years. But ultimately, the economic benefit is it's another taxpayer, not just at an individual level, but at a business level. These new businesses are then creating jobs, and we're kind of breaking up the traditional economy by bringing new suppliers into the organization, into the economy.
We always say that BEE is one of the best tools that exist for both large and small businesses if they understand how to use it properly. And what we find is that often companies, unfortunately, just treat BEE and even YES like a tick box exercise. But when it's implemented properly, it really can help grow your business's profitability. It can also ensure that you're making a difference to the lives of the people in the economy around you. And Ash, the CEO of YES, likes to remind us, you can't have a business without people. So it's important that business does ensure they take some responsibility as well for ensuring that the people in the economy are able to be active economic participants and citizens. So there's another question here asking if there'll be a summary or overview available electronically. So the answer is yes. We'll also be able to assist you. If you'd like to contact us, we can also answer any other questions you might have. Mark, maybe before we close, I'll ask you to just share with everybody what you'll share from YES's perspective. But while we've still got just over 10 minutes remaining. So one of the things I would like you to talk about, Mark, is the tax benefits, the tax incentives currently available if any companies decide to implement the YES program. We've had a couple of queries around that. I know SARS has put out some information, but if you can speak to that from a YES perspective, please.
So this is always, I wouldn't say poison chalice, but it's a hot potato to talk about. I mean, there is the employment tax incentive. So at a very high level, I mean, the employment tax incentive was set up to reward organizations who did create youth opportunities. And it was basically a sliding scale from, for those that are employed from earning 3.5 up to 6,000 a month, and the youth being 18 to 29. I just mentioned that because the YES definition of a youth is 18 through to 35. And one of the areas that we're seeing some debate from SARS is around which organizations can claim the ETI for their youth. So, if you're using these youth internally inside of you, so in other words, inside of your organization, they appear on your payroll, they're working for the benefit of your organization, there seems to be no real issue in terms of claiming that incentive. And as you know, SARS and, there've been different relief methods, but the ETI has been extended and in fact been topped up to ensure that you've got extra, kind of capacity to kind of weather the COVID environment. Where SARS seems to be creating or pushing back with some organizations is through the implementation partner model, particularly when YES is expected to run the payroll for these organizations, and when the host organization doesn't appear on the employment contract. So I just want to talk to that very, very quickly. If you go through the implementation partner model at the moment, you've got what's called a sponsored host placement agreement. And when that is set up, there is a sponsored host placement agreement between YES and the YES and the corporate, but then there's also an employment contract. Now that can be done in one of two ways. It can be either a two-party agreement, which is the implementation partner and the youth, which talks to them being the employer of those youth, or there can be a tri-party agreement where the sponsor, the youth, and the implementation partner all appear on the same agreement. SARS does seem to be pushing back against the organizations who are trying to claim the ETR but not appearing as the employers or on the payroll or on the employment contract, and that's just something to consider when you are doing the contracting.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark. That's quite important, especially technically from a back end of ensuring compliance. So here's the results of that previous poll. So there's a number of people who were not aware of the compliance or the incentives, the tax incentives for compliance. If there are any other questions around that, please do submit them and I for you now. Alternatively, we're happy to speak to you afterward and try and answer some of those questions for you as well.
I mean,
So,
maybe if I can sorry, Lee, I just want to drop one more thing in. I mean, one of the areas where we are seeing quite a lot of inquiries coming through now are organizations trying to apply for other DTRC grants incentives, such as the BIA, the Black Industrialist Scheme, Agro-Processing Support Scheme. They can obviously see this opportunity to get youth into their projects. But remembering, I mean, you know, if you want to go and apply for a lot of those incentives, you do need to be a minimum of a level 4. So, you know, yes, it's a nice way if you can kind of dovetail it with those other DTRC incentives, is to say that there are ways to make your organization work harder. So, you know, think about it as part of a holistic solution, not just as kind of a short-term gain.
I love the fact that you use the word dovetail. It's always our preferred approach to not just BEE compliance, but compliance for our clients generally. And like we said earlier, it just makes the most sense. It's the most cost-effective way to do it. And that's dovetailing all your compliance with the rest of your business strategy, and then ensuring that you can move your business forward and ensure that you can become as profitable as possible by leveraging that compliance. So one of the analogies I like to use is to say it's no different from sailing your boat across a lake. The same water that can sink the boat can also keep it safely floating to get across the other side if you know how to use it properly. So if you understand how to use BES and all the other compliance tools properly, that's one of the best ways to ensure that you can leverage it to your advantage to get safely across to the other side. So we're almost about to wrap up. Before we do that, Mark, can I ask you to talk a little bit more about some of the information we'll be able to share with the participants from YES? So what does YES have that might simplify some of the processes or that people may find valuable?
So, I mean, one of the nice things, and we'll definitely circulate this table, but effectively what we've done is try and answer this question about, you know, is YES expensive relative to other elements on the scorecard? And obviously it's not a black and white answer, but we've got a really nice costing sheet to be able to share with you in terms of the actual cost per youth per day, so that you can get a sense. I mean, often it comes into kind of the cost of 2 cups of Starbucks coffee per day is kind of the cost of implementing YES. If you think about it, then you kind of look at some of the ETI and the other incentives there. So I mean, we'll definitely circulate that table to all the participants as well. There are some updated FAQs. So in other words, as you know, we engage with the DTRC and try and get them to give us feedback from their perspective about how they would interpret certain things. So it could be everything from maternity leave through to meeting minimum wage. What are the common questions that come up on a day-to-day basis that we're regularly looking at? And we'll circulate a link to that. A lot of people are still not aware of that clarification statement which has been issued. So you should have a link to that clarification statement. And then I think it's just important to reiterate the point we've made about the change to the national minimum wage. If you haven't got that already, please make sure that you've got it. And just remember, it's also not just a blanket 3/6. It's related to the number of hours worked in the week. So that's based on a 40-hour work week. So just be aware of that in terms of your what you're doing from a payroll perspective.
Thanks for that. And Donovan, do you have any other insights or information you think is worth sharing that the participants may find value from?
Yeah, thank you, Lee, and thank you, Mark. It's been valuable having you with us on this. So thank you for all your insights. I think one of the things, and Mark brought it up earlier, when I was talking about what is the impact of YES Youth. And that becomes very important. A lot of organizations, when they look at it internally, or even if they take the project outside, we don't know what the impact is for the youth themselves or for the communities, organizations that they're supporting. So keep your pulse on that, and that is very key. Just a very quick example. Some of our youth that are working within the medical space, what we find is that with a limited number of them, less than 100, we were able to service over 8,000 households. More than 30,000 people received a much needed health support boost. We find that these community healthcare workers are now part of the COVID screening program. So look at the impact there. Look at the impact that is in terms of how much money is circulated back into that community for people to have more buying power. So there's a lot of extra things that you are doing as an organization by doing youth that you probably aren't measuring because you don't have the time. You have your own business to look after as well. The impact on the youth, I can tell you now, and if you look at all the testimonials, are incredible. The skills they find in the connections, the opportunity for hope is all there. And I think that's very important for organizations. So keep your pulse on your yes youth, keep your pulse on the project that you're implementing, and it will be a success for all of you when it's done.
Yeah, Lee, I don't know if I can just quickly jump in just because just speaking about this impact thing, and I think Donovan, like he captured it perfectly from an impact perspective in terms of the, things like the community healthcare workers. But I mean, if you just look at the impact of YES over the last 13 months, I think the net salaries is 1.5 billion Rand of youth salaries across the country. I mean, that's a very significant number. But what's even more important about that is where those salaries go. So, often in South Africa, you've got two economic hubs. You've got Gauteng, you've got the Western Cape. And, a youth that comes in to try and work at Nedbank in Sandton is not going to survive on a 3,600 Rand. I mean, just the cost of moving around Joburg is prohibitive. The cost of living in Joburg is prohibitive. But, there's some very nice projects sitting outside of, in places like Bushbuck Ridge, where unemployment is, I think, sitting nearly 70%. I mean, there's a call center there where that's supported by one of the banks, where that money stays in the community. They're creating real jobs where these things are. And I don't think you can put a price on those type of projects. I mean, another example would be this project we've just done with the CSIR, which is one of the first major state-owned enterprises to come on board. And they actually specified that they didn't want youth in either Joburg or Western Cape. They wanted to put it into these outlying communities so that the money would actually flow. The skills would flow into these communities. And in fact, they actually stipulated there that the percentage of their youth cohort actually had to be people with disabilities. So, these are incredibly vulnerable. These are people who could potentially be incredibly vulnerable. They could be ostracized in their traditional working social environment, and suddenly you've created a work opportunity where they can go and teach literacy, digital skills inside of a classroom, where disabilities don't hold them back. And I think that you can't put a price on that kind of economic impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's one of the reasons I'm such a big fan of the YES initiative, and we continue to support it. So we've got 2 minutes remaining. So can I just ask Donovan, any last comments or any last input you'd like to leave everybody with?
Very quickly, YES is a great initiative. BEE, I believe, is also, when done correctly, when implemented, with the right intentions, it's a wonderful piece of legislation that can impact many people from inside and also outside of your organization. YES is an extension of that in terms of added support towards the economy, towards communities that are not receiving support. So think about it seriously when you're considering YES. Look at the impact that you want to achieve. Whether it's for your own organization, whether it's for the communities. And I always say to companies when they want to implement YES, where are your staff drawn from? Where's their community? Support them first. Support people that are looking at buying your product. Get into those areas. And that's when you're going to find you starting getting synergy between companies, the communities, which could be their customers as well. And it creates a very good environment in terms of trust and a relationship for people to obviously start engaging with each other. So please, when you're engaging with YES, do it with the right intentions. We see most companies are, even if you're stuck in the first year, you have to do it as a quick fix. Look at it as something to continue. What are the benefits for you and what do you want out of it for your organization as well? So I'm very grateful to be part of this platform. I want to thank BEE Novation. I want to thank Yes and Mark for his time. And I think it's been a very valuable insight for a lot of organizations. There's still uncertainty. And I will say, engage with the correct people to get the correct answers so you're not caught short at your verification.
Yeah, we often see companies getting bad advice sometimes. So please speak to Yes if you're uncertain. Speak to us if you need help. Thank you for that, Donovan. Mark, any last words from you?
Yeah, I think my comment would be an optimist. You know, there's enough pessimists in the world to make the world go round. We need a few optimists to actually say we can change things. And you know, I always say to Tash that Yes is kind of one of the, you know, in tech terms, they often talk about a unicorn, which is something that's had a kind of a $1 billion or $1 billion of economic impact. You know, Yes has come a long way in a relatively short space of time. And the reality is that, you know, kind of force of personality, the legislation's aligning, the stakeholders are aligning, you guys are coming on board with some fantastic projects. Like I said, I think be an optimist. It's, you know, easy enough to be a pessimist. Let's go and do something good and let's change the world.
Thanks for that, Mark. I think it's very easy to get swallowed into a lot of the negativity that we're exposed to on a daily basis, and can be quite difficult to remain optimistic, but I think that's very good advice for anybody in business, especially right now. We're in the midst of a change that the world has probably not seen in a very long time and may not see for a very long time. So the only way we're going to survive that is to remain optimistic. So a reminder that BE, in our opinion, is one of the most powerful pieces of legislation that any business, large or small, can use to help it ensure that it remains sustainable and becomes more profitable if you understand how to use it properly. We will share some information with everybody who participated via email, including some data that Yes will provide us. And thank you to Mark and Yes for that. And also a reminder to contact us if you need additional information, or if you need help implementing your Yes initiative, or if you just need help ensuring that all the components of your BEE and your transformation in your organization are aligned in a way that helps you become more profitable. We're happy to talk to you about that, so please feel free to get in touch. And then lastly, I want to leave everybody with a very important quote. It's profitable transformation takes commitment. And that comes from one of our colleagues, Sia, who likes to remind us that transformation doesn't have to be a burden only on your business. It can be profitable, can make a difference to your bottom line if you're committed to it. So please feel free to contact us and we'll be happy to help you through that process. Thank you for the questions. Thank you, Mark and Donovan, for your valuable insights and the valuable information you've shared as well. And we look forward to engaging everybody, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you, everybody. Cheers.